I'm going to be talking about my adopted scholar, Hannah Arendt, and her theory and take on totalitarianism. Throughout this presentation, I will be talking about several goals that are highlighted by Hannah Arendt in accordance to totalitarianism, her beliefs on what totalitarianism is used for and who it appeals to, as well as how totalitarianism has become a concept of interest to scholars and rhetoricians alike in today's climate. Hannah Arendt was a Jewish woman that fled from Germany in 1933 just due to the rise of the Nazi regime as well as Hitler as a leader within the country. She witnessed firsthand the power that Hitler had and the type of government that he ran, as well as his appeal to the people within Germany. Based on her experiences and her witness of World War II, she wrote the book The Origins of Totalitarianism in 1951, which focused on not only totalitarianism, but as well as anti-Semitism, imperialism, and racism. According to Britannica, Arendt viewed the growth of totalitarianism as the outcome of the disintegration of the traditional nation state. She argued that totalitarian regimes, through their pursuit of raw political power and their neglect of material or utilitarian considerations, had revolutionized the social structure and made contemporary politics nearly impossible to predict. Within an interview and a video that took place in 1968, Arendt stated, in accordance to the totalitarian nation or government, and I assure you, for your own well-being as an individual, it's very unpleasant to live under a dictatorship or a tyranny or a one-party dictatorship. But it is paradise compared to living under a totalitarian dictatorship. This is sort of a preface to further understand her view and perception of totalitarianism. In accordance to this quote, it's clear that a totalitarian dictatorship is anything but a walk in the park. While Arendt didn't coin the term, she witnessed it firsthand, studied it, and wrote on it in numerous articles, as well as dedicated totalitarianism into an entire book. Arendt believes that totalitarian governments strive for domination of all, but are less likely to emerge in areas with small populations. So that being said, it's less likely for a totalitarian dictator to come into being within a small nation state or small city, but rather they need a large amount of individuals to follow them, which is less likely to happen in an area that has a small amount of people. According to Arendt, the appeal of totalitarian ideologies is their ability to present a clear idea that promises protection from insecurity and danger. After World War I and the Great Depression, societies were more receptive to these ideas. These ideas are fictional, and the success of totalitarianism hinges on the regime's ability to effectively obscure the distinctions between reality and fiction. One way this is accomplished is through propaganda. So in order to appeal to the masses, those within power need to they need to blur the lines between what is real and what is not real. So their truth, which may not always be factual or real, needs to appeal to the everyday person. So blurring the lines of reality is one way to do that. Arendt argues that it is because the totalitarian movement is so fundamentally invested in its imaginary fictions that the mere existence of the normal world outside is bound to appear as a threat. She holds that the incomparably destructive belligerence of a totalitarian movement in power derives precisely this. The aggressiveness of totalitarianism springs not from the lust for power, and if it feverishly seeks to expand, it does so not for expansion's sake nor for profit, but only for ideological reasons to make the world consistent, to prove that it is respective supersense has been right. So the main goal for a totalitarian government is to literally take over everything and rid individuals of their freedom. So it doesn't want to like make money off of it or anything like that. It is literally just to take over everything and make sure that everyone has the same ideas. The masses are the reason behind totalitarian government's strength. These masses don't belong to any specific population nor class. So as I stated previously, the main goal of, or in order for a totalitarian government to come into being, it needs to be within a large population. And that population doesn't need to have any specific beliefs or understanding of one particular thing or government. It needs to be able to be persuaded into believing a particular movement. So a totalitarian government is using things such as propaganda in order to appeal to these masses. And these masses will then share their ideologies with others and hopefully, again, all come to the same understanding. She argues that what tends to drive these socially isolated individuals toward totalitarian movements is not a desire to satisfy any real or perceived interest of their own, but rather a wish to escape from a human reality that their autonomized condition tends to render unbearably senseless for them. Arendt believed that within a totalitarian government, even when the regime has decimated all real or potential enemies, those within the government, such as the secret police, will be used to find other suspected enemies, regardless if crimes have been committed or not. So another goal of the totalitarian government is to overtake any other nation state or leader that is in power just based on the sole fact that they themselves or the regime itself is not in power in that particular nation state. So that nation state doesn't need to have done anything to a totalitarian government other than being not under their power. Totalitarianism's central assumption that everything is possible thus leads through consistent elimination of all factual restraints to the absurd and terrible consequence that every crime the rulers can conceive must be punished, whether or not it has been committed. So, for instance, in World War II, under Hitler's regime, which Arendt argues was not a complete totalitarian government, but on a similar scale, his goal was to decimate the Jewish population just solely based on being Jewish. Whether or not these people had committed any crimes against the government or the nation state, just because of the fact that they were a specific religion, they needed to die. The final stage of totalitarianism is described as total domination, in which the government wants to completely take away human freedom on all fronts and ensure that their regime is never questioned or looked down upon. So through the use of propaganda and trying to blur the lines of reality for the masses, they wanted to ensure, or like the totalitarian government wants to ensure that nobody questions their way of doing things or their ruling. As quoted by Arendt, it belongs among the refinements of totalitarian governments in our century that don't permit their opponents to die a great dramatic martyr's death for their convictions. A good many of us might have accepted such a death. The totalitarian states let its opponents disappear in silent anonymity. So within World War II, again, rather than do this bloody war against the Jewish people, the government just decided to decimate all of them, or try to decimate all of them through the use of mass killings such as gassing. So through these mass killings, these individuals completely lost their livelihoods, their families, just any trace of their being was completely gone, which is what the totalitarian state, that's a goal of theirs. Another quote by Arendt in The Origins of Totalitarianism is, "The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the dedicated communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, true and false, no longer exists." So again, that appeals to the masses of a totalitarian government. Based on our current political climate, the idea of totalitarianism is very relevant and has been studied by scholars as well as rhetoricians today. The language that is being used within our current political climate is a topic of conversation, and the way that that language kind of appeals to certain masses is also of importance. So, based on our political climate today, the question of Arendt's theory of totalitarianism has been questioned frequently. One concept tied to totalitarianism is that of propaganda. What convinces masses are not facts, and not even invented facts, but only the consistency of the system of which they are presumably part. Totalitarian propaganda thrives on this escape from reality into fiction, and can outrageously insult common sense where common sense has lost its validity. So propaganda is being studied again by scholars and rhetoricians in order to critique the language and appeal of such propaganda. As noted, the past shouldn't be ignored, and the lessons that we learned can be used to address our current climate. So that being said, we need to remember what happened in World War II, what happened with Stalin, and take those lessons into consideration within our own political climate. 2 reasons as to how Arendt's beliefs apply to today. A number of articles counter-argued the idea of totalitarianism during the beginning of President Trump's early days as a leader, but things have changed drastically since those initial counter-arguments. So many counter-arguments were made in 2016 after the inauguration of President Trump, but since then, those counter-arguments could have changed. Second, while Arendt focused on her place and time, she was explicit that totalitarianism was not so limited. If we can track how totalitarianism develops, she said, then it is clear that it will no more disappear with the death of Stalin that it disappeared with the fall of Nazi Germany. Just as dangerous as only seeking answers in the past is to blind ourselves with our uniqueness. So, as I stated, we need to take into consideration all that we've learned from previous regimes and powerful leaders into our current state of affairs. That being said, the theory and integration of totalitarianism within Arendt's work is incredibly important and is being used today to understand the persuasion tactics as well as the propaganda that is used in our current climate. Here are my references. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.